Donald Trump announced yesterday that there will be a 2-week pause to the war in Iran and that the United States and Iran will meet in Pakistan to negotiate a possible long-term ceasefire. He said he would use the 10-point Iranian plan as a framework for discussion. And when you actually read that 10-point plan, what you are looking at is something extraordinary. The United States would guarantee never to attack Iran again. Iran would retain complete control over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran would be permitted to enrich uranium for its nuclear program. All sanctions on Iran would be removed, including secondary sanctions against foreign entities doing business with Tehran and all United Nations Security Council resolutions targeting the country. Iran would receive compensation and reparations for all damage inflicted by the United States and Israel. U.S. combat forces would withdraw from the Middle East, effectively handing Iran regional dominance. And the United States would agree to end hostilities against all of Iran's proxies, including Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. Read that list again and tell me with a straight face that Washington accepted those terms sincerely. This is, on paper, a near-total American surrender. And when someone walks into a negotiation asking $1,000 for something worth $100, and the other side immediately says yes, something is very wrong. The ceasefire is theater, and the evidence that it is theater is already piling up within hours of its announcement. Meanwhile, please leave your questions or comments in the comments section. I will answer each one individually as time permits. Also, I would be very happy if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel. Now, let's continue. 3 things happened almost immediately that tell you everything about whether this pause is real. First, the United States continues to send military assets to the region. The USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group is currently transiting toward the Middle East. If this is genuinely a peace process, why is an additional carrier group steaming toward the Gulf? What is being positioned under the cover of a ceasefire is the infrastructure for the next phase, likely a ground operation to seize control of the Strait of Hormuz. Once everything is in position, the most probable scenario is that some provocation, possibly a false flag, provides justification to resume operations at a dramatically escalated level. The ceasefire is not buying time for diplomacy. It is buying time for deployment. Second, there is a structural problem with Iran's ability to implement any ceasefire, even if Tehran's leadership genuinely wanted one. Iran's military defense operates on what is called a mosaic model. The country's 31 provinces function as 31 semi-autonomous defensive cells, each responsible for its own strategy, its own attacks, and its own defense. There is no longer a fully centralized command structure in the way Western militaries operate. The IRGC units doing the actual fighting do not trust the Americans or the Israelis, and they are not going to stop fighting because a diplomat in Pakistan signed a piece of paper. Whatever happens at the negotiating table does not automatically translate to the battlefield. Think of the mosaic defense as a dead man's switch. The system was designed so that even if the supreme leader is killed, the provinces fight on independently. That design means the defense only ends one of 2 ways. Either Iran is completely defeated or the Americans are driven out. There is no clean middle option. If Iran's political leadership tried to enforce a ceasefire against the wishes of these mosaic units, it would essentially require Tehran to wage an internal war against its own military structure. That is a civil war scenario, not a peace scenario. So even a sincere Iranian commitment to a ceasefire may be functionally impossible to implement. Third, the United States continues running a massive air bridge to the Middle East throughout the supposed pause. Ground troops, aircraft, artillery, tanks, all of it flowing into the region at a pace consistent with preparation for a major ground operation, not a wind down. If there is really peace coming, none of this makes sense. What it tells you is that the political systems on both sides have lost a degree of control over the war itself. Once military machines of this scale start moving, they develop their own momentum. The generals, the logistics chains, the procurement pipelines, all of it is oriented toward fighting, and redirecting that momentum requires more than a presidential announcement on social media. The most revealing fracture in the ceasefire appeared within hours. The Iranians understood the agreement to include Lebanon and Yemen, meaning Hezbollah and the Houthis would be covered by the pause. Israel apparently did not agree. Almost immediately after the ceasefire was announced, Israel launched more than 100 strikes across Lebanon in 10 minutes. killing at least 250 people. Iran considers itself morally obligated to defend Hezbollah. Israel and the United States know that if Iran responds to the Lebanon strikes, they can frame Tehran as the party that broke the ceasefire. Vice President J.D. Vance called it a legitimate misunderstanding, saying the Americans thought Hezbollah was not part of the deal while the Iranians thought it was. A misunderstanding on the single most consequential question of the entire agreement. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a built-in exit ramp designed to collapse the ceasefire on Iran's terms while giving Washington and Tel Aviv deniability. The negotiations are taking place in Pakistan, which is itself a vassal state operating within the American sphere of influence. The American side is being handled by Jared Kushner, the same figure involved in the earlier diplomatic failures in Oman that contributed to the conditions leading to this war. Nothing about the venue or the personnel suggests this process is designed to succeed. It is designed to provide diplomatic cover while the military buildup continues. Now let me step back and address the bigger picture, because the ceasefire question is really just the surface layer of something much larger. The question everyone keeps asking is whether Trump is a strategic genius or an erratic fool stumbling from one crisis to the next. And the answer I keep coming back to is that those two things are not mutually exclusive. Trump is a genius at politics. He is a genius at accumulating power, at controlling his base, at destroying his domestic opponents. He is not a military strategist. He is not a geopolitical thinker. But his unpredictability, which looks like chaos from the outside, serves three very specific functions that most of his critics fail to recognize. First, it paralyzes. When a leader changes position every 24 hours, adversaries cannot formulate a coherent response. You cannot strategize against someone whose strategy changes daily. Second, it distracts. While the world focuses on the latest outrageous statement, troop deployments, institutional restructuring, and consolidation of executive power happen behind the scenes with almost no scrutiny. Third, it preserves maximum flexibility. Trump is never locked into a position because he never held a fixed one. His critics call this incoherence. In practice, it is a form of strategic freedom that more disciplined leaders do not possess. The deeper pattern underneath all of this, underneath the ceasefire theater and the military buildup and the contradictory messaging, is a fundamental restructuring of what America is and how it relates to the rest of the world. The post-1991 global order built America into the financial center of the world, the guarantor of global trade, and the enforcer of a rules-based international system. That system made certain people enormously wealthy. It also hollowed out American manufacturing, financialized the economy to a point of dangerous fragility, and created a military obligation to fight wars anywhere on the planet at any time to keep the system running. What Trump represents, whether he fully articulates it or not, is the abandonment of that model. The vision being assembled piece by piece is a continental fortress. Greater North America, from Greenland through Canada down to the Panama Canal, with Venezuela's oil reserves folded in. A self-sufficient bloc with energy, food, water, minerals, and manufacturing capacity that does not need the rest of the world to function. The Middle East war, in this framework, is not a failure. It is an accelerant. Every day the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. Every day global energy markets convulse. Every day European and Asian economies absorb the pain of disrupted supply chains. The structural dependency of the world on North American resources deepens. The same logic applies to the nations most people assume are alternatives to American dominance. China's economic miracle was not built in opposition to the American system. It was built as an extension of it. Chinese manufacturing exists because American consumption created the demand. When the system that created China comes under strain, China comes under strain with it. That is why Beijing is pressuring Iran to accept the ceasefire. Not out of altruism, but because the collapse of the global economy threatens China's foundation. The Gulf states are even more exposed. Before the global system reached them, they were desert. The system transformed them into financial centers, but that transformation has no independent foundation. When Iran attacks that infrastructure, the mirage shimmers and the sand shows through. The question of whether this war ultimately benefits or destroys America depends entirely on which America you are talking about. The financial sector, Wall Street, the debt-driven consumer economy, that America suffers enormously. But the America that sits on top of the world's most productive agricultural land, the largest freshwater reserves in the industrialized world, massive oil and gas deposits, and a population of 330 million people with enormous productive energy that America can restructure. Power shifts from finance to resources, from Wall Street to the energy sector and manufacturing, from the coastal professional class to the interior. It is a revolution disguised as a war. And the people who benefit from the old system are too distracted by the daily chaos to see the new one being built behind it. None of this means the plan will succeed. Occupying Canada and Mexico and Cuba creates insurgencies. Restructuring the economy creates losers who fight back. The ceasefire will collapse and the war will escalate and the human cost will continue to climb. But the direction is set. And the ceasefire announced yesterday, the one with the impossible terms and the built-in loophole and the continued military buildup happening underneath it, is not a step toward peace. It is a scene change between acts of a much longer play. The machinery of war does not pause because a politician says the word ceasefire. It pauses to reload.